I killed my need for motivation in 21 minutes. Here's exactly how. There's a strange addiction almost everyone has, but very few people notice it. An addiction to motivation. Not success, not discipline, not growth, just the emotional feeling of being inspired. We wait for the perfect mood before we start changing our lives. We tell ourselves, tomorrow I'll be more focused. Tomorrow I'll feel ready. Tomorrow I'll finally become productive, but tomorrow keeps moving. And eventually, years pass while a person stays emotionally dependent on a feeling that was never meant to last. That was me. I thought motivation was the key to transformation. I watched self-improvement videos late at night. I listened to speeches that made me feel unstoppable. I wrote plans for a better future. And for a few minutes, I genuinely believed I had changed. But the next morning, everything disappeared. The energy was gone. The confidence faded. The discipline vanished, and psychologically, that makes perfect sense. Because motivation is emotional stimulation, not identity transformation. The brain loves emotional excitement. It rewards novelty, inspiration, fantasy, and possibility. That's why motivational content feels powerful. It creates temporary emotional elevation. But temporary emotion is not the same as behavioral change. And most people never realize the difference. The modern world actually profits from your dependence on motivation. Think about it. Every platform constantly feeds you emotional highs. Wake up at 5 a.m. Become unstoppable. Transform your life instantly. And for a moment, you feel powerful. But real life begins after the video ends. That's where most people collapse. Because they train themselves to only act when emotions are intense. And emotions are unstable by nature. One day you feel ambitious. The next day you feel exhausted. If your actions depend on emotion, your consistency dies the moment your feelings change. That realization disturbed me deeply. I started noticing something uncomfortable. I wasn't addicted to progress. I was addicted to the feeling of progress. Planning felt productive. Thinking felt productive. Watching others succeed felt productive. But none of it was real movement. Psychologists sometimes call this mental consumption. Your brain experiences a small emotional reward simply from imagining improvement. In some cases, talking about goals can even reduce the likelihood of completing them because your mind partially mistakes intention for achievement. You feel satisfied before earning satisfaction. And that's dangerous. Because fake progress is emotionally comforting. Real progress is uncomfortable. Real progress is repetitive, quiet, boring, slow, and the human brain naturally resists slow discomfort. Especially today. Our attention spans are collapsing. Social media conditions the brain to expect constant stimulation. Every swipe delivers novelty. Every notification gives a tiny dopamine reward. Your mind slowly becomes trained for distraction instead of depth. That's why focusing feels painful now. Not because you're weak. Because your nervous system adapted to overstimulation. And motivation cannot repair that. Only behavior can. That's the part nobody told me. You do not become disciplined by feeling disciplined. You become disciplined by repeatedly acting against emotional resistance. That realization changed the way I saw myself. So one day I tried an experiment. I gave myself exactly 21 minutes. For those 21 minutes, I would stop listening to my emotions completely. No overthinking. No waiting. No emotional negotiation. If my mind said, "You're tired," I worked anyway. If my brain said, "Do it later," I ignored it. If I felt resistance, I moved anyway. And something surprising happened. The discomfort started fading after I began. Not before. After, that's when I understood one of the most important psychological truths of my life. Action creates motivation more often than motivation creates action. Most people believe motivation comes first, but the brain often works in reverse. Starting reduces resistance. Movement creates momentum, and momentum creates emotional energy. But people never experience this because they quit during the first few uncomfortable minutes. The beginning is where the mind fights hardest, because the brain values familiarity over growth. Even harmful habits feel psychologically safe when repeated enough times. That's why change feels threatening. Your brain interprets uncertainty as danger. So when you try to improve your life, your mind often reacts with resistance, fatigue, distraction, or self-doubt. Not because you're incapable, because your brain is trying to protect you from discomfort. But comfort is not always safety. Sometimes comfort is stagnation. And that's terrifying, because many people slowly build entire identities around avoidance. Avoiding failure, avoiding rejection, avoiding effort, avoiding uncertainty. Then one day they wake up feeling disconnected from the person they could have become. The frightening part is this: human beings can adapt to almost anything, even misery. If a person repeats the same emotional patterns long enough, they begin believing that's simply who they are. I'm lazy. I'm inconsistent. I can't focus. But many identities are just repeated behaviors wearing psychological masks. And once I understood that, everything shifted. I stopped asking, "How do I feel?" and started asking, "What does the future version of me do right now?" That question is powerful because identity shapes behavior. People protect identities more than goals. A person trying to quit smoking may fail repeatedly, but a person who genuinely sees themselves as not a smoker behaves differently. The same applies to discipline. When you constantly say, "I'm trying to become productive," your brain still sees productivity as temporary. But when you say, "I am someone who acts regardless of mood," your actions slowly begin aligning with that identity. That's how transformation actually happens. Not through emotional explosions, through repeated proof. Every small action becomes evidence. Every time you act despite resistance, you teach your brain something new. My emotions do not control me. That creates self-respect. And self-respect is deeper than motivation. Motivation is excitement. Self-respect is trust. It's the ability to look at yourself and know, if I say I'll do something, I do it. Most people underestimate how psychologically powerful that is. Because confidence is not built from positive thinking. Confidence is built from evidence. The brain believes actions more than words. That's why broken promises to yourself hurt so deeply. Every time you repeatedly abandon your own goals, your mind quietly loses trust in you. And eventually, you stop believing yourself entirely. That's why discipline is emotional healing in disguise. It repairs self-trust. Not instantly, but gradually. And strangely enough, once I stopped chasing motivation, life became calmer. I no longer needed dramatic emotional highs to function. I stopped worshiping inspiration. I stopped waiting for perfect moods. Because the truth is, your feelings will always change. Some mornings you'll feel powerful. Some mornings you'll feel empty. But your future cannot depend on emotional weather. Otherwise, your life becomes unstable too. The strongest people are not emotionless. They simply learned how to move while emotions fluctuate. That's real psychological strength. And maybe that's what maturity actually is. Understanding that you can feel unmotivated and still do what matters. You can feel afraid and still move forward. You can feel lost and still continue. That realization gave me freedom. Not freedom from discomfort, freedom from dependence on motivation itself. And once that dependence disappeared, I finally understood something. Motivation is temporary, but systems, habits, and identity, those are what quietly shape a human life. Conclusion. Most people are waiting to feel ready before they change. But readiness is often an illusion. The people who transform their lives are usually the ones who stop negotiating with every emotion they feel. Because emotions are temporary, but repeated actions become identity, and identity becomes destiny. You do not need motivation to begin. You only need the willingness to move before your mind feels comfortable. That's the psychological shift that changes everything. Questions for the viewer. How many dreams have you delayed waiting for motivation? Are your emotions controlling your actions? Have you become addicted to the feeling of self-improvement instead of real change? What would happen if you acted before feeling ready? Who could you become if you stopped negotiating with yourself every day? And the most uncomfortable question of all, what part of your life already knows exactly what needs to change, but keeps waiting for a feeling that may never come?